The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Kensington Palace as Prince William sat in his private study, surrounded by official papers and correspondence. The weight of his royal duties pressed down on him like a familiar blanket, but today something felt different. Catherine had been acting strangely for weeks, disappearing into the bathroom at odd hours and declining her favorite morning coffee. The signs were becoming impossible to ignore. William rubbed his temples as he tried to focus on the briefing documents spread across his mahogany desk. The upcoming state visit required his full attention, but his mind kept wandering to his wife's recent behavior. She had always been good at keeping secrets when necessary, but this felt different. There was a glow about her, a certain energy that he had seen before during her first pregnancy with Prince George. The heavy oak door to his study creaked open, and Prince Harry's familiar red hair appeared around the edge. His younger brother wore that mischievous grin that had gotten them both into trouble countless times during their youth. Harry had always possessed an uncanny ability to read people, especially family members, and William could already sense that his brother had picked up on the subtle changes in the household atmosphere. "Morning, big brother," Harry said, settling into the leather armchair across from William's desk without invitation. "You look like someone who's been keeping interesting secrets. That's the same face you made when you were trying to hide your relationship with Catherine from the press." William looked up from his papers, attempting to maintain his composure. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm simply reviewing documents for next week's engagements." Harry leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. "Right, and I suppose Catherine's sudden aversion to her morning coffee is just a coincidence? Or the way she's been wearing those loose-fitting dresses to recent events. Come on, William. I may be the spare, but I'm not blind." The truth was that William had been wrestling with the news for several days. Catherine had confirmed her suspicions with a private doctor just 3 days earlier, and they had agreed to keep the information within their immediate circle until they could determine the right time for an official announcement. The royal protocol surrounding pregnancy announcements was complicated, involving careful coordination with Buckingham Palace, the Prime Minister's office, and various Commonwealth realms. Even if there was something to discuss, William said carefully, "You know there are proper procedures for these matters. We can't simply share family news without considering the broader implications." Harry's grin widened. "Ah, so there is something to discuss. You just confirmed it with that diplomatic non-denial. This is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. George is going to be a big brother, isn't he?" William sighed, realizing that his attempt at discretion had backfired spectacularly. Harry had always been able to see through his carefully constructed defenses. During their childhood, their mother Diana had often commented on Harry's intuitive nature, his ability to sense unspoken emotions, and hidden truths within the family dynamic. "Harry, please. Catherine, and I need time to process this ourselves before we start involving others. The last pregnancy was overwhelming with all the media attention and public speculation. We're trying to handle things differently this time. But that's exactly why you need your charming younger brother's support," Harry said, standing up and moving to look out the window at the palace gardens. "I remember how stressed you both were during the first pregnancy. All those horrible headlines about morning sickness and hospitalization. This time, we can control the narrative better." William joined his brother at the window, watching the gardeners tend to the rose bushes that had been their mother's favorite. "It's not just about controlling the narrative, Harry. It's about having space to be a family without constant scrutiny. Every doctor's appointment, every public appearance, every outfit choice becomes front-page news." "I understand that," Harry replied, his tone becoming more serious. "But isolation isn't the answer either. You have people who care about you, who want to help carry some of that burden. I've watched you shoulder too much responsibility alone for too many years." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Catherine herself, who appeared in the doorway looking slightly pale but radiant. She wore a flowing blue dress that cleverly disguised her changing silhouette, and her famous smile seemed to carry extra warmth. Both brothers turned toward her, and Harry's knowing look made William realize that their secret was definitely out. "Good morning, Harry," Catherine said warmly. "I thought I heard voices. Are you two plotting something again? Harry's eyes sparkled with mischief. Actually, I was just congratulating William on his upcoming promotion to father of two. Though apparently, I'm not supposed to know about that yet. Catherine shot a questioning look at William, who shrugged helplessly. He guessed. You know how he is with these things. Actually, Catherine said, settling into another chair, maybe it's time we started trusting the people closest to us. The secrecy is becoming more stressful than the actual situation. Harry clapped his hands together. Excellent. Now we can start planning properly. Have you thought about timing for the announcement? Public engagements during the pregnancy? How to handle the inevitable media circus? William felt a familiar tension building in his chest. This is exactly what we wanted to avoid. The moment we involve other people, it stops being about our family and becomes about managing public perception and royal protocol. But it doesn't have to be that way, Harry argued. We can be strategic without being cold. We can protect Catherine and the baby while still sharing appropriate information with people who care about you both. Catherine placed a gentle hand on William's arm. He has a point, darling. We can't control everything, but we can choose how to handle what we can control. And having Harry's support might actually make things easier, not harder. The three of them sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts about the implications of this new development. The palace around them hummed with its usual activity, staff members moving efficiently through their duties while remaining carefully unaware of the significant conversation taking place in the private study. Harry broke the silence first. So how far along? 8 weeks, Catherine replied. Still very early, but the symptoms are definitely stronger this time around. And George doesn't know yet? We're waiting until after the first trimester, William said. He's still so young, and we want to be certain everything is progressing normally before we start explaining big brother responsibilities to him. Harry nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense, though he's going to be excited when he finds out. He's been asking about babies lately, according to his nanny. How do you know what George has been asking his nanny? William asked suspiciously. Because I pay attention to my nephew, Harry replied with mock indignation. And because Maria mentioned it when I stopped by last week. He saw a baby in the park and wanted to know why some families have more children than others. Catherine laughed softly. Children have such perfect timing with their questions, don't they? It's like they sense changes before we're ready to explain them. The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical concerns and emotional adjustments that would need to be made in the coming months. Harry's natural enthusiasm began to chip away at William's carefully constructed walls of worry and control. Despite his occasional frustration with his brother's casual approach to royal protocol, William had to admit that Harry's optimism was infectious and oddly comforting. By the time Harry left the study, promising to keep their secret while offering his full support, William felt lighter than he had in days. Catherine's relieved expression confirmed that sharing their news with someone they trusted had been the right decision, even if it hadn't been entirely planned. The rest of the day proceeded with typical royal efficiency. William attended a briefing about upcoming Commonwealth visits, reviewed speech drafts for a charity gala, and participated in a video conference with various government officials. But underneath the routine of official duties, he found himself thinking about Harry's words and Catherine's obvious relief at having family support during this early stage of pregnancy. That evening, as William and Catherine sat together in their private sitting room, they talked more openly about their hopes and concerns for the pregnancy. The weight of public expectation felt more manageable when shared between them, and Harry's enthusiastic support had reminded them that they didn't have to navigate this experience in isolation. Do you think we made the right choice telling Harry so early? Catherine asked, curled up against William's side on their comfortable sofa. I think Harry would have figured it out anyway, William replied, stroking her hair gently. At least this way, we're in control of how much he knows, and when he knows it, he's going to be impossible to contain once we make the official announcement, Catherine said with a smile. You know how he gets when he's excited about family news. William chuckled, remembering his brother's barely contained enthusiasm during George's pregnancy and birth. He'll probably start planning elaborate uncle adventures before the baby is even born. As the evenings settled around them, both William and Catherine felt a sense of cautious optimism about the journey ahead. Having Harry's support, even in these very early stages, provided an anchor of family connection that would help them weather whatever challenges the pregnancy might bring. The palace walls that sometimes felt like protection could also feel like isolation, but today they had chosen connection over complete privacy, and the decision felt right. The following morning would bring new challenges and considerations, but for now, they were content to simply be together, sharing quiet excitement about the new addition to their growing family, while drawing strength from the knowledge that they weren't facing this experience entirely alone. 3 weeks had passed since Harry discovered Catherine's pregnancy, and his promise to maintain secrecy was being tested daily. Every family gathering became an exercise in subtle observation and barely contained excitement. The young prince found himself analyzing every conversation, every gesture, every carefully chosen word from his brother and sister-in-law. During a routine family lunch at Clarence's house, Harry sat across from William and Catherine, watching his brother navigate questions from their father about upcoming royal engagements. Prince Charles, ever focused on the monarchy's public duties, was outlining a particularly demanding schedule of events for the autumn season. The tour of Australia and New Zealand will require significant preparation, Charles was saying, gesturing with his fork toward William. The diplomatic implications are substantial, and Catherine's presence would be particularly valuable for the various women's organizations we'll be meeting with. Harry noticed the almost imperceptible glance that passed between William and Catherine. They had clearly discussed this already, probably weighing the challenges of international travel during early pregnancy against the diplomatic importance of the tour. We'll need to review the specific dates and requirements, William replied diplomatically. Catherine has several commitments that we'll need to coordinate with the tour planning. Harry bit his tongue to suppress a grin. Commitments was certainly one way to describe regular doctor appointments and morning sickness. He caught Catherine's eye across the table and gave her an encouraging smile that he hoped looked appropriately brotherly rather than conspiratorial. Actually, Harry interjected, unable to resist a gentle probe, shouldn't we be considering whether such an extensive travel schedule is appropriate for all family members? I mean, some situations require more careful consideration than others. William shot his brother a warning look, but Harry's question seemed innocent enough to escape their father's notice. Charles simply nodded thoughtfully, interpreting Harry's comment as concern about security arrangements rather than pregnancy considerations. Security is indeed a primary concern, Charles agreed. But the Foreign Office believes this tour is crucial for strengthening Commonwealth relationships, particularly given recent political developments in both countries. Catherine spoke up carefully. Perhaps we could discuss the specific itinerary and make adjustments as needed. I'm certainly committed to supporting the Commonwealth relationships, but we want to ensure we can fulfill our duties effectively. Of course, my dear, Charles replied warmly. We'll work with your team to create a schedule that accommodates everyone's needs. After lunch, as the family members prepared to leave, Harry lingered in the hallway with William and Catherine. The moment their father was out of earshot, Harry's careful composure dissolved into barely contained amusement. Commitments, Harry whispered. That's the best euphemism you could come up with for prenatal appointments? It's accurate, William replied defensively. And it's better than announcing the pregnancy over Sunday lunch before we've had time to plan properly. Catherine laughed quietly. Actually, I thought William handled that quite well. Much better than last week, when he nearly choked on his tea when Charles mentioned the importance of expanding the next generation. I did not nearly choke, William protested. I simply paused to consider his words carefully. You turned 3 shades of red and had to excuse yourself to the bathroom, Harry countered gleefully. I thought Catherine was going to have to explain that you were coming down with something. The truth was that these family interactions were becoming increasingly stressful for William. Every casual comment about future plans, family expansion, or royal duties felt loaded with hidden meaning. He found himself overanalyzing his own responses, worried that his father or other family members would pick up on subtle clues about Catherine's condition. "We need to make a decision about timing," Catherine said, her voice becoming more serious. "We can't keep this secret indefinitely, and I'd rather control when and how the news comes out rather than worry constantly about accidental revelations." Harry nodded enthusiastically. "Plus, the longer you wait, the more awkward it becomes. Better to announce early and manage the process than to have someone notice and start speculation in the press." William ran his hand through his hair, a gesture Harry recognized as a sign of his brother's internal stress. "I know you're both right, but once we make the announcement, everything changes. Our private family moments become public property. Catherine's every appearance gets analyzed for signs of how the pregnancy is progressing. That's going to happen anyway," Harry pointed out gently. "The only question is whether you want to control the narrative from the beginning or react to speculation and rumors later." Catherine placed her hand on William's arm. "Darling, we've discussed this. Hiding isn't protecting our family. It's just postponing the inevitable while adding unnecessary stress to our lives." Over the following days, Harry watched his brother struggle with the balance between protection and transparency that defined so much of royal life. Every decision carried implications beyond their immediate family, yet the most important considerations were deeply personal and emotional. During a private dinner at Kensington Palace the next week, the conversation finally turned to concrete planning. Catherine had reached the 10-week mark, and her morning sickness was becoming harder to disguise at public events. The royal physicians had confirmed that everything was progressing normally, and both parents felt ready to begin sharing their news with close family members. "I think we should tell George first," Catherine said as they sat in their comfortable dining room, away from staff and protocol officers. "He deserves to hear it from us before anyone else, and he's old enough to understand what it means to be a big brother." Harry, who had been invited to join the planning discussion, nodded approvingly. "George will be thrilled. He's been asking more questions about babies lately, and Maria says he's been particularly gentle with younger children during playdates." "How exactly do you explain royal protocol to a 2-year-old?" William asked, half joking but genuinely concerned. "George will want to tell everyone he meets about his new sibling. We'll explain it as a special family secret until Mummy and Daddy say it's time to share," Catherine replied. "Children understand special secrets, especially when they feel included in something important." Harry smiled at his sister-in-law's natural parenting instincts. She had an intuitive understanding of how to communicate with children that both impressed and slightly intimidated him. "When will you tell him?" "This weekend," William decided. "We'll have some quiet family time, and then we can gauge his reaction before moving to the next phase." "Which is telling father and grandmother?" Harry asked. "In that order, yes," Catherine confirmed. "Charles should know before the Queen, but we want both of them informed before we start involving staff members or making official announcements." The logistics of royal pregnancy announcements were more complex than most people realized. Beyond the immediate family, there were constitutional considerations, Commonwealth protocols, and carefully orchestrated media management that required weeks of preparation. The palace press office would need time to develop strategies for managing public interest while protecting the family's privacy. "Have you thought about how to handle the Australia tour?" Harry asked, returning to a practical concern that had been weighing on everyone's minds. William and Catherine exchanged glances. "We'll probably need to postpone it," William admitted. "The travel requirements and schedule demands would be too stressful during the first trimester, and the timing doesn't work well with the expected due date." "The Foreign Office won't be thrilled," Harry observed. "The Foreign Office will adapt," Catherine replied firmly. "This isn't the first time royal schedules have required adjustment for family reasons, and it won't be the last." Harry admired his sister-in-law's growing confidence in setting boundaries around royal duties. During her first years as a working royal, she had been eager to please and accommodate every request. Motherhood had given her a clearer sense of priorities, and the courage to advocate for her family's needs. So the timeline is George this weekend, then father and grandmother next week, followed by staff briefings and official announcements. Harry summarized. That's the plan, William confirmed. Unless something unexpected happens, or we change our minds about timing. What could make you change your minds? Harry asked curiously. Catherine smiled. If George decides he can't keep the secret, we might need to accelerate everything. 2-year-olds aren't known for their discretion, royal training notwithstanding. The conversation continued late into the evening, covering everything from medical considerations to media management strategies. Harry found himself genuinely impressed by the level of thought and preparation that went into what should have been a simple family announcement. The complexity of royal life never ceased to amaze him, even though he had lived within it his entire life. As the evening wound down, Harry felt a deep appreciation for being included in these intimate family discussions. His role as the spare often meant being informed about major decisions after they had already been made, but William and Catherine had chosen to involve him in their planning process from the early stages. "Thank you for trusting me with this," Harry said as he prepared to leave. "I know it's not always easy to include family members in these decisions." William smiled, the stress lines around his eyes softening. "You're going to be an uncle again. Of course, you should be part of the planning process. Just promise me you'll let me know when you tell George," Harry added. "I want to be prepared for a very excited little boy who might want to share his news with his favorite uncle." Catherine laughed. "We'll give you fair warning. Though knowing George, he'll probably want to call you immediately after we tell him." As Harry walked back to his own apartment, he reflected on the evening's conversation and the journey that lay ahead for his growing family. The next few months would bring challenges and adjustments, but they would also bring joy and new connections that would strengthen the bonds between all of them. The weekend would mark the beginning of a new phase in their family story, and Harry found himself looking forward to watching his nephew take on the role of big brother with characteristic enthusiasm and charm. Saturday morning arrived with unusual quiet at Kensington Palace. William and Catherine had deliberately cleared their schedules, dismissing all but essential staff members to create the private family atmosphere they needed for their important conversation with George. The young prince, now 2.5 years old, was developing his own personality and curiosity about the world around him. Harry had received a text message from William early that morning. "Today's the day. Wish us luck." He found himself checking his phone throughout the morning, wondering how the conversation was progressing and whether his nephew was taking the news with excitement or confusion. At Kensington Palace, Catherine sat cross-legged on the carpet in George's playroom, while William settled into a comfortable chair nearby. Their son was engaged in building an elaborate tower with wooden blocks, his tongue sticking out slightly in concentration as he carefully placed each piece. "George, darling," Catherine began gently, "Mummy and Daddy want to talk to you about something very special." The little boy looked up from his blocks, his bright eyes curious, but not concerned. At his age, serious conversations from parents usually meant exciting news like trips to visit Granny or special outings to places he enjoyed. "Is it about going to see the horses?" George asked hopefully, referring to a promised visit to the royal stables that had been postponed due to bad weather. William smiled. "It's something even more special than horses, George. Would you like to hear about it?" George nodded enthusiastically and abandoned his blocks to climb onto his mother's lap. Catherine wrapped her arms around him, drawing comfort from his warm presence as she prepared to share their family's growing excitement. "Well," Catherine continued, "you know how some families have more than one little boy or girl? Like Tommy at nursery," George replied immediately. "He has a baby sister who cries a lot." William and Catherine exchanged amused glances at their son's practical assessment of infant behavior. "That's right, like Tommy's family," Catherine agreed. "Well, our family's going to grow too. Mummy has a baby growing in her tummy, which means you're going to be a big brother." George's eyes widened as he processed this information. He placed a small hand on Catherine's stomach, looking puzzled. "There's a baby in there right now." "Yes, sweetheart, but it's still very tiny," Catherine explained patiently. "It needs to grow bigger and stronger before it can come out and play with you." When will it come out? George asked with the direct curiosity of a toddler. Not for many months, William answered. The baby needs time to grow, just like you needed time to grow before you were born. George seemed to accept this timeline without question, his attention already moving to more practical considerations. Will it be a brother or a sister? We don't know yet, Catherine replied. What would you like it to be? George thought carefully, his face serious with the weight of this decision. A brother would be good for playing with cars, but a sister might like dolls, and I could teach her about horses. William felt a surge of pride at his son's thoughtful response. Despite his young age, George was already demonstrating the kind of inclusive thinking that would serve him well as a member of the royal family. Either way, you're going to be the best big brother, Catherine said, hugging George closer. But this is a special family secret for now, okay? We need to tell Grandpa Charles, and gone first before other people know. George nodded solemnly, understanding the concept of family secrets, even if he didn't fully grasp the reasons behind them. Can I tell Uncle Harry? Uncle Harry already knows, William admitted with a smile. But we need to keep it secret from everyone else until Mummy and Daddy say it's okay to share. Will Uncle Harry teach the baby to play football like he teaches me? George asked, his excitement beginning to show as the reality of a new playmate sank in. I'm sure Uncle Harry will want to teach your brother or sister all sorts of games, Catherine replied, imagining Harry's enthusiasm for expanding his role as the fun uncle. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with George asking practical questions about baby care, sleeping arrangements, and whether the new sibling would be able to join in his favorite activities. His matter-of-fact acceptance of the news relieved both parents, who had worried about potential jealousy or confusion. By afternoon, George had fully embraced his upcoming role as big brother. He insisted on showing Catherine's stomach to his favorite stuffed animals, explaining in whisper tones that there was a secret baby inside. His natural protectiveness toward his mother increased noticeably, offering to carry her water glass and asking if she needed to rest. William called Harry that evening after George had been put to bed. How did it go? Harry asked immediately, barely waiting for his brother to speak. Better than we hoped, William replied, settling into his study with a sense of relief. He's excited about being a big brother, and he seems to understand about keeping it secret for now. Did he ask about me? William laughed. Actually, yes. He wanted to know if you'd teach the baby to play football like you do with him. Of course I will, Harry replied without hesitation, though I might wait until the baby can actually hold its head up before we start with proper training sessions. He also told Catherine's stomach all about his favorite toys, William continued. Apparently, the baby needs to know about trucks and trains before it arrives. Harry could picture his nephew's earnest explanations to his unborn sibling. He's going to be brilliant at this big brother thing. When are you telling Father? Tomorrow afternoon. We're having tea at Clarence's house, and we figured a quiet family setting would be best. And Grandmother? Monday morning. We'll go to Windsor for a private audience. Harry nodded, though his brother couldn't see him through the phone. The countdown to official announcements begins then. Not quite yet, William corrected. We want to get through the first trimester before making any public statements. But, yes, the family notification process starts tomorrow. The next day, William, Catherine, and George made their way to Clarence's house for their scheduled tea with Prince Charles. The atmosphere was relaxed and informal, with Charles clearly enjoying time with his grandson while discussing recent royal engagements with William and Catherine. George played quietly with toy soldiers on the carpet while the adults talked, occasionally contributing observations about his toys or asking for help with particularly challenging battle arrangements. Father, William said during a natural pause in conversation, Catherine, and I have some family news to share with you. Charles looked up with immediate interest, his expression shifting from casual grandfather to attentive father. What sort of news? We're expecting another child, Catherine said simply, smiling at Charles's surprised but delighted expression. My dear girl, that's wonderful news, Charles exclaimed, standing to embrace Catherine warmly before turning to congratulate William. How far along? 11 weeks, Catherine replied. Everything is progressing normally, according to the doctors. Charles turned his attention to George, who was watching the adult conversation with interest. And, George, how do you feel about becoming a big brother? I'm going to teach the baby about horses and cars, George announced proudly. And Uncle Harry is going to teach it football. Charles laughed heartily at his grandson's confident plans. It sounds like this baby will be very well educated indeed. The conversation that followed covered practical considerations about royal duties, medical care, and timing for public announcements. Charles offered his full support and suggested involving the Queen's private secretary in preliminary planning discussions. Have you considered the implications for your upcoming engagements? Charles asked thoughtfully. We'll need to make some adjustments, William acknowledged, particularly for any travel requirements during the first and third trimesters. Of course, the palace will work with your team to accommodate any necessary changes to your schedule. George, who had been listening to parts of this conversation, suddenly looked up from his toys. Grandpa Charles, it's a secret until Mummy says we could tell everyone. Charles smiled indulgently at his grandson's careful adherence to family protocol. Of course, George, we'll all keep the secret until it's time to share the happy news. As they prepared to leave Clarence House, Charles pulled William aside for a private moment. I'm truly happy for you both, he said quietly. And I'm impressed by how thoughtfully you're handling the announcement process. Your mother would have been so proud to see the parents you've become. William felt a familiar tightness in his chest at the mention of Diana, but this time it was accompanied by warmth rather than sadness. Thank you, Father. That means a great deal to both of us. That evening, as William and Catherine reflected on the day's conversations, they felt a growing sense of confidence about their expanding family. George's enthusiasm, Charles's support, and Harry's ongoing encouragement created a foundation of family backing that would help them navigate the more challenging aspects of public royal pregnancy. One more family conversation tomorrow, and then we can start thinking about official timelines, Catherine said, curled up beside William in their sitting room. Are you nervous about telling grandmother? William asked. Catherine considered the question carefully. Not nervous, exactly, but I want to make sure we handle it properly. She's been through so many family changes over the years. She'll be delighted, William assured her. Another great-grandchild to spoil when no one's looking. As they settled in for the evening, both parents felt grateful for the family support system that surrounded them. The next phase of announcements would bring new challenges, but they would face them together, backed by the love and enthusiasm of their growing royal family circle. Monday morning dawned crisp and clear as William, Catherine, and George prepared for their journey to Windsor Castle. The drive through the countryside provided a peaceful transition from the bustling atmosphere of London to the more serene environment of the Queen's private residence. George pressed his nose against the car window, watching horses graze in the fields they passed. Mummy, will Gon be happy about the baby? George asked, using his special name for the Queen that had developed from his earliest attempts to say great-grandmother. I think she'll be very happy indeed, Catherine replied, smoothing his hair affectionately. Gon loves all her great-grandchildren very much. William felt a familiar mixture of nervousness and anticipation as they approached Windsor Castle. Despite years of royal protocol and countless formal meetings, conversations with his grandmother about personal family matters still carried special weight. The Queen had guided the monarchy through decades of change, and her approval and support meant everything to him. They were greeted at the private entrance by one of the Queen's personal staff members, who led them through familiar corridors to the comfortable sitting room where Her Majesty preferred to receive family members for informal visits. The room was decorated with personal photographs and mementos that told the story of her long reign and growing family. Queen Elizabeth II rose from her chair as they entered, her face brightening at the sight of her great-grandson. Despite being well into her 80s, she maintained the posture and presence that had defined her reign for more than 60 years. "Good morning, Your Majesty," William said formally, bowing slightly before stepping forward for a warmer familial greeting. "Grandmother," Catherine added, curtsying before accepting the Queen's embrace. George, who had been carefully coached about proper greetings, made his best attempt at a bow before running to hug his great-grandmother's legs enthusiastically. "Hello, darling boy," the Queen said warmly, ruffling George's hair with obvious affection. "Have you been good for Mummy and Daddy?" "Yes, Gun. And I have a secret that Mummy said I can tell you," George announced with barely contained excitement. The Queen's eyes twinkled with amusement as she looked questioningly at William and Catherine. "A secret? How intriguing. Perhaps we should all sit down so you can share this important information." They settled into the comfortable furniture arranged around a low coffee table where tea service had been prepared. George climbed onto the sofa between his parents, practically bouncing with excitement at being allowed to share family news. "Well, George," the Queen said seriously, "I'm ready to hear your secret. Mummy has a baby in her tummy," George announced proudly. "I'm going to be a big brother and teach you about horses and cars and everything." The Queen's face lit up with genuine delight as she looked from George to his parents. "My dear Catherine, what wonderful news. Congratulations to all of you." William felt relief wash over him at his grandmother's immediate positive reaction. "Thank you, grandmother. We're very excited, though we're still in the early stages." "How far along?" the Queen asked with the practical directness that characterized her approach to family matters. 11 weeks, Catherine replied. "The doctors are very pleased with how everything is progressing." "And you've told Charles?" "Yesterday afternoon," William confirmed. He was absolutely delighted and offered his full support for any schedule adjustments we might need to make. The Queen nodded approvingly. "Good. Family should always be informed before staff or official announcements. Have you begun thinking about timing for public disclosure?" William and Catherine exchanged glances, having anticipated this question. "We'd prefer to wait until after the first trimester," Catherine said carefully. "We've learned the importance of privacy during these early weeks." "Very wise," the Queen agreed, "though you'll want to be prepared for speculation if your public appearances change noticeably." George, who had been listening to this adult conversation with interest, suddenly spoke up. Gone. Uncle Harry already knows the secret too. He's going to teach the baby football." The Queen smiled at her great-grandson's casual revelation. "Uncle Harry knows? How did that happen?" William laughed ruefully. He guessed. "You know how perceptive Harry can be about family dynamics." "Indeed I do," the Queen replied with amusement. "I imagine he's been quite beside himself with excitement since learning the news." "He's been remarkably good about keeping the secret," Catherine said appreciatively, "though we can tell he's eager to start planning elaborate uncle activities." "Harry has always been enthusiastic about his role with George," the Queen observed. "I'm sure he'll be equally devoted to this new addition." The conversation continued for nearly an hour, covering practical considerations about royal duties, medical care, and the complex process of managing public interest while maintaining family privacy. The Queen's decades of experience with royal pregnancies and births provided valuable perspective on navigating the unique challenges they would face. "Have you given thought to how this might affect your Commonwealth responsibilities?" the Queen asked thoughtfully. "We'll need to postpone the Australia and New Zealand tour," William admitted. "The timing doesn't work well with either the early pregnancy stage or the expected due date." "The Commonwealth will understand," the Queen assured him. "Family considerations have always taken precedence when necessary, and both countries will be delighted to reschedule for a more appropriate time." George, who had been playing quietly with a small toy car during the more serious parts of the conversation, suddenly looked up with an important question. Gone. Will you teach the baby about being royal like you teach me?" The Queen's expression softened at her great-grandson's earnest inquiry. "Of course, darling. Though you'll be the baby's first teacher about many things, won't you?" "Yes," George replied enthusiastically. "I'll show it how to wave properly, and how to be quiet during church, and everything." William felt a surge of pride at his son's growing understanding of his future responsibilities, even at such a young age. The balance between normal childhood and royal expectations was always delicate, but George seemed to be finding his way naturally. Your Majesty, Catherine said as their visit began to wind down, we wanted to ask for your guidance about announcement timing and protocol. We want to handle everything appropriately. Work with the private secretary's office to develop a timeline, the Queen suggested. They'll coordinate with the various Commonwealth realms and ensure all constitutional requirements are met. But don't feel pressured to announce before you're ready. We appreciate that flexibility, Williams said gratefully. Family happiness should never be rushed or managed purely for public consumption, the Queen replied firmly. You have my complete support for handling this announcement on your own terms. As they prepared to leave Windsor Castle, the Queen walked them to the private entrance, an unusual gesture that spoke to her personal investment in their family's well-being. George skipped ahead, chattering about all the things he would teach his new sibling, while William and Catherine felt the deep satisfaction of having their family support for the journey ahead. Thank you for everything, grandmother, William said as they reached the car. Your support means the world to us. You're building something beautiful, the Queen replied, looking at George and then at Catherine. I'm proud of the parents you've become and excited to welcome another great-grandchild into our family. The drive back to London was filled with a comfortable sense of completion. They had successfully shared their news with the most important family members, and everyone had responded with enthusiasm and support. George fell asleep in his car's seat, exhausted from the excitement of sharing his big secret. That went even better than I hoped, Catherine said quietly, taking William's hand as they traveled through the afternoon countryside. Grandmother was wonderful, William agreed. I love how she always focuses on what really matters. Family first, protocol second. And George was perfect, Catherine added, smiling at their sleeping son. He's going to handle being a big brother beautifully. That evening, Harry called to check on how the conversation with the Queen had progressed. So, is grandmother planning elaborate great-grandmotherly spoiling activities yet? He asked with amusement. She was absolutely delighted, William reported. And George charmed her completely by announcing that you're going to teach the baby football. Of course I am, Harry replied matter-of-factly. It's practically an uncle's duty, though I might start with softer balls until the baby develops proper coordination. You realize the baby won't be born for 7 more months? Catherine reminded him, having taken over the phone call. 7 months isn't that long to plan a proper football training program, Harry countered. I need to research age-appropriate equipment and techniques. William and Catherine exchanged amused glances at Harry's characteristic enthusiasm. Their family was ready for this new adventure, complete with an excited uncle already planning elaborate activities for an infant who wouldn't arrive until summer. The formal family announcement phase was complete, and now they could begin the more complex process of preparing for public disclosure while protecting their privacy during these precious early months of pregnancy. With their family's love and support surrounding them, they felt ready for whatever challenges and joys lay ahead. 2 months had passed since the family announcements, and Catherine was now showing clear signs of her advancing pregnancy. At 16 weeks, her growing belly could no longer be completely disguised by clever clothing choices, and the palace staff had begun preparing for the inevitable public announcement. The morning sickness had mostly subsided, replaced by the increased energy that often characterized the second trimester. Harry had been masterful at maintaining the secret while providing ongoing support to William and Catherine. However, his excitement was becoming increasingly difficult to contain during public appearances and family events. During a recent charity polo match, he had caught himself starting to mention the baby before quickly covering with comments about George's development as a young rider. The breaking point came during a family barbecue at Highgrove, Prince Charles's country estate. The intimate gathering included only immediate family members, allowing for relaxed conversation without the usual protocol considerations. George was playing in the garden with his cousins while the adults enjoyed a leisurely afternoon meal on the terrace. Catherine, you're absolutely glowing, Camilla commented warmly as they sat enjoying the summer sunshine. Motherhood has always suited you beautifully. Harry, who was sitting across the table, couldn't resist adding, well, she's got good reason to be glowing these days, hasn't she? William shot his brother a sharp look, but Harry's comment could easily be interpreted as general appreciation for Catherine's happiness and health. Harry's right, Prince Charles agreed, raising his glass in a casual toast. It's wonderful to see you both so settled and content. Family life clearly agrees with you. We've been incredibly blessed, Catherine replied diplomatically, her hand unconsciously moving to rest on her still small bump in a gesture that was becoming habitual. George chose that moment to run up to the table, his face flushed from playing in the garden. "Daddy, when is the baby going to be big enough to play outside like me?" The entire table fell silent as George's innocent question revealed the family secret to those who hadn't yet been informed. Camilla's eyes widened with surprise and delight, while several other family members looked between William and Catherine with growing understanding. "George," William began, but his son was already continuing with his enthusiastic explanation. "The baby is in Mummy's tummy, but Uncle Harry says it needs to grow bigger before it can play football," George announced to the assembled relatives, clearly proud of his knowledge about his developing sibling. Harry buried his face in his hands, though he was grinning broadly. "Well, that's one way to handle the extended family announcement," he muttered. Camilla immediately stood to embrace Catherine, her face radiant with excitement. "My dear girl, how absolutely wonderful. When were you planning to tell us?" "Today, actually," Catherine replied with a laugh, accepting congratulations from family members who were now understanding the significance of recent subtle changes in her behavior and appearance. "We wanted to wait until we were safely into the second trimester," William explained, standing to accept handshakes and embraces from relatives who had been kept in the dark about the pregnancy. "And how far along are you now?" asked Princess Anne, who had been observing the scene with her characteristic directness. 16 weeks, Catherine replied. "Everything is progressing beautifully, according to the medical team." George, delighted to be the center of attention for revealing such important news, continued his explanation. "I'm going to be the best big brother ever. I'm going to teach the baby about horses and cars and how to wave at people properly." "I'm sure you will, darling," Camilla said warmly, ruffling George's hair. "This baby is going to be very lucky to have such a thoughtful big brother." Harry finally looked up from his hands, his face showing mock exasperation mixed with genuine amusement. "So much for our carefully planned announcement strategy. Though I have to admit, George's approach was much more natural than all our diplomatic preparation. Sometimes the best revelations happen spontaneously," Prince Charles observed with a smile. "I'm absolutely delighted for all of you, and particularly excited for George's adventure in becoming a big brother." The afternoon continued with renewed energy and excitement as family members asked questions about due dates, medical care, and how they could support William and Catherine during the pregnancy. The relaxed atmosphere of the barbecue provided the perfect setting for sharing news and receiving enthusiastic family support. Later that evening, as William, Catherine, and George prepared to return to London, Harry pulled his brother aside for a private conversation in Charles's study. "Well, that didn't go according to plan," Harry said with a rueful laugh. "But honestly, I think George's announcement was perfect. No formal protocol, no nervous speeches, just pure family excitement." "You're probably right," William admitted. "We've been overthinking the announcement process when the most important thing is sharing our happiness with people who care about us." "So what's the timeline now for the public announcement?" William ran his hand through his hair, considering their options. "We'll need to accelerate our plans. Once the extended family knows, it's only a matter of time before the information reaches other circles. We should probably make the official announcement within the next 2 weeks. Are you ready for that?" Catherine joined their conversation, having settled George in the car with his nanny. "I think so. The medical team is confident everything is progressing normally, and honestly, I'm tired of trying to hide my growing bump at public events." "The press is going to go absolutely mad," Harry observed. "You know how they obsess over royal baby news." "We'll manage," William replied with more confidence than he had felt in previous weeks. "We have good support systems in place, and we've learned from our experience with George's pregnancy. Plus, this time you have an extremely enthusiastic uncle who's already planning comprehensive football training programs, Harry added with a grin. Catherine laughed. Speaking of enthusiastic uncles, you might want to prepare yourself for increased responsibilities. George is already assuming you'll be heavily involved in teaching his sibling about all sorts of activities. I wouldn't have it any other way, Harry replied seriously. Being Uncle Harry is one of my favorite jobs, and I'm looking forward to expanding my expertise to include a second royal nephew or niece. The drive back to London was comfortable and reflective. George chattered about the day's excitement and his cousin's reactions to learning about the baby, while William and Catherine processed the shift from private family secret to broader family knowledge. Do you regret how it happened? Catherine asked William as they navigated the evening traffic. Not at all, William replied honestly. George's natural excitement was much better than any formal announcement we could have planned. It reminded everyone that this is fundamentally about family joy, not royal protocol. And Harry looked relieved to finally have the secret out in the open, Catherine added with amusement. Harry's been incredible throughout this whole process, William reflected. His support has meant everything to me, even when I was being overly cautious about protecting our privacy. He's going to be an amazing uncle to both children, Catherine agreed. George adores him, and I know this new baby will too. Over the following week, the palace communications team worked efficiently to prepare for the official public announcement. Press releases were drafted, photography sessions were planned, and media management strategies were refined based on lessons learned from previous royal pregnancy announcements. The formal announcement came on a Tuesday morning, released simultaneously through official palace channels and social media platforms. The statement was simple and elegant. Their Royal Highnesses the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge are delighted to announce that the Duchess is expecting their second child. Her Royal Highness continues to carry out her full program of official engagements with the support of her medical team. Harry's response to the public announcement was characteristically enthusiastic. Within hours, he had issued his own statement expressing his excitement about becoming an uncle again and his confidence that George would be the most dedicated big brother in the world. The public reaction exceeded all expectations, with congratulations pouring in from Commonwealth leaders, charitable organizations, and thousands of well-wishers around the globe. The news dominated headlines for several days, but the carefully managed announcement process allowed William and Catherine to control the narrative and maintain appropriate privacy boundaries. As the media attention began to settle into a more manageable rhythm, the family could finally relax and enjoy their expanding happiness without secrecy or careful word choices. George reveled in being able to tell everyone about his upcoming sibling, while Harry began openly discussing his plans for introducing a second royal child to the joys of outdoor activities and gentle mischief. The journey that had begun with Harry's perceptive questioning in William's study had evolved into a family celebration that strengthened bonds between all of them. The pregnancy announcement marked not just the anticipation of a new royal baby, but the continuation of a family legacy built on love, support, and shared excitement for the future. With several months still remaining before the baby's arrival, William, Catherine, Harry, and George could look forward to a summer filled with preparation, anticipation, and the quiet joy of a growing family surrounded by the love and support of the extended royal family and the British people who shared their happiness.